Hello and welcome to the GPP Hail Mary podcast for NFL Week 11. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Josh Shepardson at BChad50. Talking about some of the plays you wrote up, some of your favorite plays, obviously. Trying to be a little contrarian here, but also get yourself some big upside. Try to find the nice balance in between the two. Certainly GPP plays don't come without risk, but that's what the name of the game is. You got to play the players that no one else is going to play. If there's no risk, then they're obviously going to be highly owned. Speaking of one that really doesn't have much risk, but is surprisingly low owned, as you mentioned so far in the Thursday contest, Tom Brady. Granted, he's more expensive than everyone else, but he's earned the right to be more expensive. He's been the best quarterback in football, and it really hasn't been close this year. Facing off against your Buffalo Bills, as you can see in the background there. And any smart offensive coordinator, any smart quarterback, any smart coach knows you don't attack the Bills in the running game, especially when you're missing your best running back at Deion Lewis. Sorry, LeGarrette Blount. There's a reason why you're the secondary guy. But they know this is the way to attack these guys, and that's why Tom Brady threw 59 passes the first time against them. Obviously, game flow kind of dictated that ridiculously high number. But they're going to be looking through the air. No Julian Edelman, no Deion Lewis, missing some key pieces. But that just means more volume for guys like Gronkowski and Amendola. And, I mean, Tom Brady has done more with less before. So I'm a huge fan of Brady in all formats, really, but at GPPs especially.
Yeah, I mean, as long as he's got Gronk, I feel pretty good about Brady. His game in Week 2 against the Bills was his best fantasy game of the season. I mean, season high in yardage, season high in pass attempts, completed a ton of passes, and he didn't throw any picks. And they could not get to him. They could not generate a pass rush. And remarkably, he was owned in under 10% of the Thursday FanDuel mini dive GPP contests. And, I mean, I get it. People don't want to pay up for quarterback in GPPs. But when Tom Brady's playing at a level that's pretty close to on par with his 2007 season, basically he's pacing to best his yardage total that season. He's just going to come up a little bit short, on pace to come up a little bit short of the touchdown total. I mean, that's a historically good season, and Brady's basically doing that like it's nothing right now. So gotta love him. Gotta love what he still has it for weapons. I mean, Gronk is the embarrassment of riches that you need. The other guys are just nice to have as well. Danny Amendola, Brandon LaFell, they're fine, they're good, but as long as Gronk is there, that's what matters.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's Tom Brady looks, like you mentioned, as good now as he ever has in his entire career. So this is I'm going to ride this until the wheels fall off. Don't look at age, look at production, and Tom Brady's production is off the charts this season. So don't miss out before it's too late, even though he says he's going to play till he's about 100. But, I mean, at this rate, it's hard to believe that he won't still be efficient at that rate. But
yeah, no evidence to the contrary right now. So
yeah, absolutely. And a guy that I wasn't a believer in that would actually even last this long, but thrust into a starting role now, Mark Sanchez. More famously known for the butt fumble than he is for a good quarterback play. But at the same time, was productive last year in Philadelphia. Has a great rapport with Jordan Matthews, who, as we know, freak athlete, great body control, trouble with his hands. That certainly gives him a boost this week as well. But you got a quarterback, Mark Sanchez, who's cheap this week. You're facing the Tampa Bay defense that it's not a bad defense. It's a middle-of-the-road defense, but a very beatable defense. And you get a nice discount with Mark Sanchez, so he's the guy that you see the name and you wish it was just numbers, and you could just kind of close your eyes and say, okay, this guy with these numbers, play him. But at the same time, I mean, Sanchez, like we said, he's been productive with the Eagles.
And the thing is that name actually could benefit gamers who have the stomach to roster him, because he was only 2% owned in the Thursday mini dive, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that this is Mark Sanchez. You know him for butt fumbling, you know him for just making a mess in New York with the Jets, but he's the minimum salary on DraftKings. He's only $6,400 on FanDuel, and he's a guy who averaged 277 yards passing per game in Chip Kelly's offense last year in 8 games, and in addition to that, he averaged 10 yards rushing, which is an extra point. And he averaged 1.5 touchdowns per game. And you look at just his averages from last year, you're talking about a guy who's pretty easily going to pay off that minimum salary. And the upside's for more because, as you noted, the Bucs are a middle-of-the-road defense. They're actually a little bit better against the run than the pass. So this is a matchup that looks pretty good. And a nice team total of 25.5 points for Mark Sanchez. So odds makers clearly are not deterred from running out a nice total for the Eagles. And I guess the other thing I would add is Chip Kelly kind of has a way of making chicken salad out of chicken other things. I mean, look at what he did with Nick Foles under center. Look at what he did. Look at what he's done with Sanchez. I mean, he's made some things out of some bad quarterbacks. So I have some faith in this offense, and I have some faith in Sanchez running it.
Yeah, I do as well. And I mean, it's a low risk type of play with solid upside at his current price tag. Next up, a guy who was a popular play at least a few weeks early in the season, was a big workload back. Now, passing attack really flowing well for Derek Carr and company. Kind of gotten away a little bit from the running game, but Latavius Murray, it's not due to lack of production because the guy still looked fine. He's been a solid back this season, and like you mentioned here, Carr very, very popular. So a lot of people, when you see a popular quarterback, you say, well, I want someone else in GPPs, but why not look at the productive running back in that same offense? Because Lat Murray does catch passes as well. So imagine all the Carr owners that are high, and you go in and get yourself some Lat Murray, or maybe you fade Carr, and I mean you get him at very low ownership when everyone's looking at this offense, but they're looking at the passing game and not the running game.
Oh, yeah. I mean, in addition to Carr being the highest owned quarterback in that mini dive on Thursday, Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree both cracked the top 5 at wide receiver. So there are a ton of gamers on that passing attack. But as you and I talked about before recording, I mean, this is a situation where if Carr puts up 300 yards and they end up stopped at the 10 and it turns into the Lat Murray show at the goal line, all of a sudden you've got yourself a sneaky low-owned back who was not high-owned in the Thursday contest and is tied to an offense with a decent total this week and against a bad defense, and everybody's looking at the Lions secondary for being terrible, but they're allowing some serious point scoring to running backs as well. Murray has only carried the ball 20 or more times twice this year, but surprisingly, because he's been used in the passing game, he's touched the ball at least 16 times in every single contest this year. And he doesn't need a lot of volume to be effective because he's rushing for 4.7 yards per carry, and that includes some games against significantly tougher run defenses than he's facing this weekend. So this is a good opportunity, as I said, to zig when everybody else is zagging. Everybody's going with the passing attack. Grab the running back that's productive, that can hit home runs, that is facing a soft run defense and is tied to that same high total that you love with the passing attack.
Yep, absolutely. Definitely get yourself a piece of that at low ownership. Is going to be nice. Next up, Darren McFadden. Short disclaimer on this one. He did miss some practice this week with a groin injury. No indication he's going to sit out this game or that's a serious injury. Seems like they're kind of taking it easy with obviously DeMarco Murray out of town, Lance Dunbar, broken leg and gone, Joseph Randle. I don't know. He's trying to steal a roster spot somewhere else, whatever he's doing now. But Darren McFadden facing off against Miami. Obviously, Tony Romo back in town. If I'm the Miami Dolphins, I'm not worried about trying to stop Darren McFadden. I'm looking at Tony Romo and Dez Bryant and Jason Witten and saying, how do I slow down this passing attack, which, as we know, we've seen Romo step right back in. I mean, we've seen him with punctured lungs have success in the passing game. So that's where you worry about stopping him. And Darren McFadden's going to get his. And the great thing is Tony Romo does like to check down to his running backs at times. And Darren McFadden proven already that he's a good pass catcher. And, I mean, he has been throughout his career, even in college. So Darren McFadden, kind of that two-way back. It's a little bit cheaper than you like and hasn't had that huge upside recently, but you add a player like Tony Romo into an offense, and that's automatically going to inject a lot of value and upside into players like McFadden.
Yeah, usually you hate to see a guy who's gotten McFadden's volume lose some volume. I mean, he's touched the ball at least 20 times in every game since that Giants game 4 weeks ago, and he may not necessarily get the 20 touches this game, but when you're tied to an offense that's significantly better with Tony Romo under center as opposed to Matt Castle, this team total would not be 23.75 points for the Cowboys if Matt Castle was still under center.
No.
You're tied to a much better offense now, an offense that's going to be able to move the ball, and you get near the goal line, and all of a sudden Darren McFadden creeps into play as a touchdown threat, something he really hasn't been in the Matt Castle-led offense. Yeah, the volume's been nice, the yardage has been nice, but he hasn't found the end zone a lot, and that's because he's tied to a bad offense. This offense gets an uptick. He is a capable pass catcher. He's caught an average of 3 passes per game over the last 4. He can be utilized on dump-offs, can be utilized as a runner, and if defenses have to stay honest and they aren't allowed to just load up the box, that offensive line can move people. La'el Collins has been an absolute pancake machine opening up running lanes. He gets to do that when they don't have the box loaded up. Look out for McFadden to have a big game. Really like his ability to beat teams on the ground and through the air. And the Dolphins are allowing the most rushing yards per game of any team playing this week. You get your bye week brownies and leave the Dolphins to be the worst run defense left out there at this point.
I was going to say, don't throw my Bengals in.
Yeah, sorry. I got the Ohio. I got a little hyped up and got the Ohio teams mixed up there for momentary.
Well, if you're anyone who's our age, I mean, you're used to, you think, what, terrible football teams. Bengals, Browns, but I mean it's changed for one of us.
It has.
I'll take my Bengals there. The Browns, fun to pick on, so we'll get back to picking on them next week. Next up, Dez Bryant. Yep. I love Dez Bryant. This is the perfect week to play a guy like Dez Bryant because obviously some people are going to be worried about Romo coming back from injury. I'm not. Maybe I should be a little bit. I don't care. I love the Romo Bryant duo, and you and I were talking before the show. Personally, it seems to me the only better duo, the only more valuable quarterback wide receiver duo, my opinion, in the league is Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown. I mean, you can make a case for Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, but I think that Tony Romo was a far superior quarterback to Matt Ryan. Personal opinion, of course. If there are Falcons fans, I don't think I know any Falcons fans. Maybe they'd be offended by that. I mean, personally, Tony Romo, I mean, he's a very good quarterback. Matt Ryan is a good quarterback.
Yeah, and all that the duo did last year was Bryant led the league in touchdown reception. So they obviously have good chemistry. They're back together this week, and they're facing a defense that ranks dead last according to Football Outsiders defending number one receivers. So it should be pretty easy for Bryant to get some looks this week. Even if Romo's rusty, you expect the volume to be there. So even if the efficiency isn't, the volume should make up for that efficiency. Like this offense this week, love Bryant and his matchup, and expect him to play at a high level. I mean, if you can turn in a game where you eclipse 100 yards with Matt Castle as your quarterback, I like your odds of turning in a solid start with anybody at quarterback, basically. And Tony Romo's a little bit better than anybody.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a big fan there. Dez Bryant, if I'm paying up for anybody, it's going to be him. Right behind him, Mike Evans, who there are some rumblings that Vincent Jackson, who was previously declared out for this week, questionable. We've seen this before with wide receivers, though. Even if they play, guy dealing with an injury, especially when it had already been officially ruled out, technically, would they play? Maybe they're a decoy. I mean, Evans did that same exact thing earlier this season, missing a game with it, or was supposed to miss a game with an injury. He played, and I mean, he saw, I think, 3 targets, didn't catch a single one because he wasn't healthy. We've seen that with Calvin Johnson a million times, and obviously, Vincent Jackson's nowhere near the caliber of Calvin Johnson. He never really was, but I don't imagine him getting a lot of production at less than 100% when you've got Mike Evans on the opposite side. So for me, I almost hope in GPPs that Jackson does return so that people are a little bit scared off of Evans. Maybe they take their chances on Jackson. I sure as hell won't be playing him, but I'm also not really worried about coming off Evans for that.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, teams have done it before. You activate these big play threat receivers, even if they're under 100%, to use them as decoys to draw coverage away from a guy like Evans. At less than 100%, which Jackson certainly will be if he is active. As you noted earlier in the week, it was basically said he's not going to play. And then all of a sudden, Thursday and Friday, he's a limited practice participant. Could be gamesmanship, might not be. Maybe he is active. But regardless, Mike Evans has been a target machine. 53 targets over the last 4 weeks. That's just a staggering number. That's almost 16 targets. I'm sorry. That's almost 15 targets a week. A little under, about 14, roughly, a week. And that kind of volume against a secondary that just doesn't have an answer for him, whether it's Nolan Carroll or Byron Maxwell lining up against him. Carroll ranks 54th among cornerbacks at Pro Football Focus. Byron Maxwell ranks even worse, 79th at cornerback. And it should come as no shocker, they're 31st defending number one receivers according to Football Outsiders. This is a dreamy matchup for Mike Evans, and he should get all the volume he can handle. And with the game flow expected to be what it is, I mean, the Buccaneers are pretty sizable underdog, right around a touchdown underdog against the Eagles. Probably going to be in a position where they do have to air it out. That means it's Mike Evans' time.
Yep, absolutely. And I like you said, I'm not a huge Jameis Winston fan. He's got a lot of work to do. We'll see with him. Yeah. He's inaccurate, but either way, you got a number one wide receiver in a team that's going to need to score points. It's a no-brainer with a guy like Mike Evans. Next up, looking at the opposite side of that game, actually. Kind of mentioned him earlier with the Mark Sanchez thing. Mark Sanchez, I mean, really since college, I don't know that he's had better rapport with any weapon than he has with Jordan Matthews in his short time with the Eagles. I mean, we saw these guys have some huge performances last season, and they're like a match made in heaven. We saw this like preseason last year. They're saying, look at these two guys, how well they're working together. I know Jordan Matthews is excited to see Mark Sanchez back, which is strange for a wide receiver to say, God, I miss Mark Sanchez. But it's the case with him, and take it as narrative, whatever you want. I mean, it's not something you can really dispute. He's been much, much better with Mark Sanchez under center.
9 games played together last year, averaged just over 6 targets, just over 4 receptions, 66.56 receiving yards, and caught a touchdown in 2/3 of the games that he played with Sanchez, or at least averaged a touchdown in 2/3 of the games. Probably had a multi-touchdown game in there. I actually don't have the game log in front of me, but point being, they played well together. I mean, he averaged double-digit DraftKings points as a receiver with Sanchez under center last year, and that was as a rookie. I mean, he's certainly had more time to get adjusted to the NFL, get adjusted to Chip Kelly's system. You'd expect them to work probably even better together the second go-around just because Matthews is more experienced at this point, and he doesn't have a guy like Jeremy Maclin to compete with for touches anymore. So really like Jordan Matthews this week. And the fact that he's burned owners of late, especially last week, had a cushy matchup against the Dolphins, was a guy that I touted here on the podcast last week and liked in the wide receiver article last week. Failed us. But that's all the more reason to think that it'll be low-owned this week, despite his good numbers with Sanchez. So, gotta love a guy with low ownership like that does have upside.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be a good spot for him. And then, speaking of upside, surprisingly, Rob Gronkowski last week had his longest touchdown of his career. I mean, he's always a threat. Not usually a deep threat, but he's such a tough cover, and yes, Buffalo's good against tight ends, but I don't even consider Rob Gronkowski a tight end anymore. I don't know what the word would be for him, but it's tight end.
Freak.
And there's Rob Gronkowski. Yeah, a god among tight ends. I mean, the guy is so big and so strong and so fast, and you see it time and time again. I mean, especially with Julian Edelman out. I mean, who knows how many more targets he could get. It's going to be a pass-heavy attack as it is, but even more so than most weeks. I mean, you're going to feed Gronkowski this week. And you know Gronk is going out there hungry. He always does. And, I mean, you see this every week where once he catches the ball, who the hell's going to stop him? You so rarely ever see one player tackle Rob Gronkowski unless you just kind of clip him as he runs, kind of take out his legs. I mean, the guy is an absolute freak of nature.
And he's so tough in the red zone. The guy's a touchdown scoring machine, but he's not one of these Kyle Rudolphs where it's touchdown or bust. The guy's still getting a ton of targets. Without Julian Edelman, I mean, he is clearly the one. There's no longer a 1A and 1B. It is Gronk the one, sizable gap, and then your number 2 is Danny Amendola in the slot, and that's it. I mean, Amendola's going to get his, obviously, but that's not the point here. But when it comes to the red zone, Gronk's your man, and even between the 20s, it's going to still be Gronk all day. And he's a matchup nightmare. And by matchup nightmare, I mean he is not guardable by one player. There's no one player on any defense in the NFL that can take Gronk away from a team. And he's working with Brady at such a high level, with Brady playing so well, the team featuring the highest over-under total this week. I mean, there's just so much to like here with Gronk. And the fact that he was owned on just 14% of the Thursday mini dive teams is wonderful. I mean, you can get him at under 20% ownership. Sign up for that all day.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you get Rob Gronkowski under 100% ownership, and I want some Rob Gronkowski. So, definitely get yourself some pieces of these plays for your GPPs to set yourself apart. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We've got lots of other great NFL, NBA, everything else content at dailyfantasycafe.com.